Hi everyone, I'm Rivera Sun, and this is Candlelight, Nonviolence in Dark Times. We're looking at a situation very perturbing, very disturbing, in which an elected president came along with somebody who was completely unelected. Nobody voted for him. He didn't go through any process of being approved by Congress, no nomination. All of a sudden, the friend of the president was just put in charge of seemingly everything, of important decisions, of things that affected people's jobs, that affected their livelihoods, that affected the functioning of our public servants, that affected whether or not children were going to be fed, or Kansas grain farmers had the ability to sell their grain. This is immense power in the hands of someone that nobody elected, nobody nominated, nobody reviewed, and nobody confirmed. What do we do in a situation like this, when it feels like immense power has been amassed by someone who has no check or balance in this system? Well, fortunately for us, our candlelight story today actually looks at South Korea's incredible Candlelight Revolution in 2016. And yes, I did know about this revolution in thinking about this series. So here's the story, here's the setup. President Park, the female president of South Korea, had a friend. Her name was Sun-sil Choi. Now, this friend was discovered to have a laptop, and on the laptop were all the president's speeches. Maybe that wasn't a big deal. Maybe you share those with a friend to get some feedback. But more importantly, the president's friend, who had no official place in the government, was not appointed, had no nomination, no confirmation, wasn't even hired by the government officially, also had the draft policies of her friend, President Park. And this was more problematic because it was suspected that Choi was going around influence peddling, right? Saying, oh, well, my buddy, the president, is going to do such and such. And if you do such and such, then maybe quid pro quo, we'll do such and such. This is problematic. No one voted for Choi. Nobody appointed them. So when this came out, a coalition that ultimately grew to 1,500 groups throughout South Korean society came together to call not just for Choi's accountability, but for President Park to resign. Let's stop and think about this for a minute, because in our own situation, we want the friend of the president to stop doing his abusive behaviors and to stop being put in charge of things that maybe shouldn't be put in charge of. But in South Korea, they were smart. They said, let's not just want the friend gone, let's hold the president accountable for this action. So they wanted the resignation. So they started to hold these candlelight vigils every night. It started with just a couple, 10,000 people. Then all of a sudden there were 200,000 people, and then 1,000,000 people. And this coordinating committee of the coalition was so smart. They met every week for 3 to 4 hours, and they planned each demonstration. They wanted to keep them clever, witty, humorous, uplifting, soulful, and nonviolent. And they knew you don't just call people into action without giving people training, instruction, and expectation about how we're going to behave ourselves, conduct our side of this struggle to uphold our sense of morality, dignity, respect, a sense of civil society, that we are the backbone of our country. They also, wanted to make sure that music was part of this, that people's spirits were being kept high, and they even could cultivate a sense of humor about what was going on. For example, one sign read, Korea is like a convenience store with buy one, get one free products. It seems that when we elect one president, we get one more person, this friend, Choi. Does that sound familiar? So this kind of humor helped people have a sense of their power together. And week after week after week after week, they kept holding these demonstrations. And after 4 weeks of these mass demonstrations, politicians who had been reluctant to push for Park's resignation, mostly because they were afraid that if Park resigned, they couldn't win the election if there was an early election called. Well, after all these protests, they finally switched sides. And they said, oh, we have to impeach the president. And the prosecutors who had been looking into the corruption charges against Choi filed them in the actual courts. This galvanized the movement, said, yes, there is wrongdoing here. Yes, there's political momentum. Yes, it is time to hold this president accountable. The largest farmers union in the country drove to the Capitol in their tractors. 1.5 million people protested in Seoul. 400,000 simultaneously demonstrated elsewhere in the country. By a few weeks later, 2.3 million were out demonstrating for Park's impeachment. Now, even after she was impeached by Congress, the protesters were smart. They didn't stop their campaign. They knew that in order to have real accountability, it wasn't just that the Congress had to impeach the president, it was that the courts had to uphold that impeachment and hold the president accountable and to strip Park from power. So for month after month, they kept up the struggle until finally in March 2017, the court upheld the impeachment by an 8-0 vote, unanimous vote. And the very next day, people gathered for a celebration of democracy with floats, with costumes, with tons of people in the street, with these candlelight vigils to celebrate what they had achieved. Altogether, over the 20 weeks of this campaign, 15.8 million South Koreans, a third of the entire country's population, had participated in this campaign for democracy. What an incredible story. And it didn't happen a million years ago. It didn't happen last century. It happened just a few years ago. It gives us an idea of the organizing, the coalition building, the tone, the energy, the ways to mobilize mass demonstration, and what to do if we too find ourselves in a buy one, get one free situation where we have an elected official who has nominated a friend for a position we don't think they should be holding or that they are abusing. So take inspiration from the South Korean Candlelight Revolution. If they can do it there, we can do it here. Thank you. I'm Rivera Sun, and this is Candlelight, Nonviolence in Dark Times.